Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and in today's video we'll actually do something a little bit different from the normal stuff on the channel. From the billion videos online, you might have seen that Legion Time Walking is coming out very soon to patch 915, and it's super exciting. In fact, I think this is the most amount of people that I've seen that are excited for this Time Walking expansion to finally return. As someone who played Legion, I am hyped. I am so happy that they're bringing so many different aspects of it, from the dungeons to the Mythic Plus dungeons to the Mage Shower, which were all unforgettable experiences of the whole expansion. But what is it exactly about Legion that makes it so? Why is there so much hype about Legion in particular? Because I found out a lot of players actually didn't play Legion. So I thought we should take a time out of our day to talk about why Legion probably was one of the better expansions of World of Warcraft, especially of the newer expansions, and why it was so memorable to so many people. Before we really dig our teeth into why Legion was so good and why so many people speak so fondly of it, it's worth mentioning that none of the World of Warcraft expansions are perfect. Out of all the ones that I've played, Legion is definitely one of my biggest highlights though. However, none of the expansions have had a flawless record from the start to the end. There's always something about the expansions that players don't like. There's always criticism to every system, to every change, to every adaptation, to the buffs and nerfs to classes, how fair or unfair they may have been. And I want to say that Legion is no different. It's an expansion with its own ups and downs, depending on who you are, depending on what kind of content you enjoy. It wasn't a perfect experience for everybody. Whether you're talking about RNG legendaries or maybe the way the artifact weapon system was done at the very beginning. Also worth mentioning that Legion didn't always have the highlights throughout every single patch. Like some of the newer WoW expansions, it started off strong with the sprint at the very beginning once the game launched. Then by the first patch it slowed down a little bit in the hype. However, it built that hype back up towards the end of the expansion with quality of life adjustments, all friendly benefits, as well as course correction for some of the systems or class design. I just felt like it was worth mentioning this before we really dive into why Legion was so good and so memorable to so many players, and why so many people want for Blizzard to return with the same Legion quality of design for everything they do in the game. Also, most of you guys watching my videos are not subscribed. You might as well subscribe since you watch these videos anyway. Subscribe, hit the bell, helps out the channel, gets the videos to you, and lets you guys know on any 915 updates, WoW updates, class updates, or the duel videos. When it comes to Legion, we first have to start with the pre-patch event. We'll start before Legion even released, and this event was pretty cool. Pre-patch event, Invasion of Azeroth. Essentially what Blizzard did is drop in a bunch of demons as well as some kind of a fell commander at the end of it in some of the starting area zones for Alliance and the Horde players. Imagine going to the Red Ridge Mountains, and instead of seeing the nice little hamlet, it's now burned in green fell flame, and there's a massive demon on top of the chapel, and now everybody has to band together to take that guy out. It was a scalable content where low-level players as well as high-level players could get benefits from it, low-level players with a ton amount of XP, high-level players with catch-up gear as well as currencies in order to buy any of the goodies, toys, or whatever that was available for the Legion event. And the game would kind of take you all over the place. You would have these events somewhere out in the world that for the most part people would just level through and then never go back to, since we were just coming off of Warlords of Draenor. And it gave a lot of players a reason to come back to some of the older areas, some of the starting zones, and it was truly a unique experience that was beneficial for leveling new characters to get excited for this expansion or just getting a bunch of goodies before they're gone while in the pre-patch event. When Legion started, one of the first things everybody got to explore was the zones, so let's talk about one of the biggest highlights of this expansion. The zones for Legion were broken up originally into 5 zones, 4 of them you would quest through. The first one on our stop would be High Mountain. The mountains of High Mountain are fantastic. The massive peaks, the elevation for it, the scale of these mountains that you can see from the distance. And if you were to actually be able to climb to the top of them, which before flying you could, on a lot of these mountains you could actually get to the very top, the world looked tiny from that angle. It really gave you a bit of a perspective of what kind of expansion you were going to play. It was massive, it was huge. The music for the High Mountain, the variety of different biomes from, of course, you have the mountains, but you also have hills, you have valleys, you have a bit of a swamp, cave systems and such. There was even different mountain tops, from the ones that had a lot of the greenery on it to the ones that reached really high into the sky where the snow would accumulate, and you would even find holes and dwellings in the ice that resided on top of those hills. Following Stormheim, which was this Viking paradise with, again, like High Mountain, lots of mountainous areas, but a lot more of down to earth, very forestry, something where only the toughest, only the most resilient inhabitants of Stormheim would reside in. And of course, the Vikro, the Viking lore and the Viking culture was pretty strong in this area. You had Vikro tribes that worshipped their ancestors and spirits, some for the good, some for the evil. Others were more down to earth, very druid-like. Then you had those that tamed dragons and rode them into the sky, and others that guarded sacred places of the Vikro culture. While Val'sharah was a completely different biome, mostly made of forest. Basically a paradise for any druid out there, with a lot of the different wildlife, but also different creatures, various slimes, various forest kin, various creatures like owlkin, harpies, as well as more sinister stuff, especially in the more corrupted side of Val'sharah. But it wasn't just all forests, it was even a whole castle for the Black Rook Hold, where you actually find out that that place has a significance in lore to Illidan Stormrage at a later time if you played. And right next to it, part is actually a Gilnean hamlet of Gilneans before they even taken the curse of the Worgen. Val'sharah being the zone that followed the story of Ysera, Xavius, Malfurion, and Tyrande, especially with the cinematic with Ysera and how she ended up in Shadowlands. And finally, Azsuna, which has a lot of water around it, which is a perfect place for Naga encampments. Azsuna being very well known for the encounter with Azshara and why the Naga are there, but the place is also full of magic and wonder that has Nightborne trying to siphon the magic out of it. Demon presence is of course very strong here as well. Blue Dragonflight is there as well as the Vault of the Wardens way off in the coast next to a pirate cove, way out in the distance, housing some of the worst creatures of Azeroth down into the Warden prison. What I'm hopefully trying to paint here is a picture of zones that are all varied, that all are unique. And I know I don't really have any literary skills myself to really describe this in better ways, but a lot of these places were breathtaking. And I haven't even talked about Suramar. Suramar, I would say, is the jewel in the middle of all these zones. It is the peak of the artistic side of Blizzard. The art team, a lot of people say, carries the game, and Legion, I think, is just a perfect reminder for it. I think Suramar would be best identified as a city of high class and magic. This is where the best of the Nightborne culture is. Everything is so elegant, there's statues everywhere. Sure, there's demon prowling the streets, but look at the vineyard, look at the zoo, look at the spotless streets, until you look at the underbelly where you see where some of the wretched, the undesirable Nightborne live as they're about to turn into the withered. On the outskirts of the city, you see what was once part of the big elven empire. Some of the ruins, some of the homes now in shambles, kind of overtaken and overgrown by the surrounding fauna. And it's just an interesting contrast of this high-class magical empire city as well as the zones around it. And honestly, for the most part, you wouldn't really notice this stuff. If you're just going on about your dailies, trying to do some dungeons, PvP, you probably wouldn't even look up and just look around. But when it comes to just comparing these zones to some of the other expansions and really sitting down and appreciating it, you do see some stark differences. Anyway, I'm gonna stop gushing about the zones. Let's talk about the artifact weapons because those were controversial. Now with Legion, everybody's getting an artifact weapon. That means you have a bunch of paladins running around with the Ashbringer. You can already guess why a lot of people will be upset. You're putting a bunch of these historic, powerful weapons and even some cool new ones with their own backstories into the player's hands, but now everybody who's a Retribution Paladin has the Ashbringer. It might take you out of the game and out of the experience a little bit. However, I felt the artifact weapons really added more than they took away. When at least taking a look at it in retrospective, the artifact weapons brought in their own storylines. Every one of these weapons and how you acquire them had a mini storyline, sometimes with cutscenes, maybe with a big final fight, of how these weapons came to be. What is the purpose of these weapons? What is the story behind these weapons? And who wielded them in the past? What is the purpose? What is so different about them and why are they so powerful? And while not every one of these weapons were wielded by a very known hero, the rogue weapons in particular, like the Owl Rogue one, they kind of just had to come up with something. Same with Subtlety Rogue, but at least they came up with a story. A story that you could experience when you play one character. You got to experience at least 3 stories. 2 on a Demon Hunter, 4 on a Druid, but on average still is a 3. This gave weapons a lot of replayability. Combined together with the class order halls with a storyline for every single class, there was so much replayability. You could go back and play alts and find out the history, the significance of these items, the significance of your class, and how your class experiences the storyline, or at least a portion of it, throughout the expansion of Legion. And you can say what you want about our powers. These artifact weapons did round out our characters pretty well. Once you got enough AP in order to complete it, once you got the defensives, utility, and offensive, and even capstone traits that really modified the way our classes played, these weapons were pretty influential and really changed how we played with our classes. But besides just power progression, there was also cosmetical progression based on the things you did in the game, whether it is professions, whether it is PvP, dungeons, whether you did some hidden achievements in order to unlock really unique skins. You can get different looks for your weapon, the different styles of it. You have an Ashbringer, what if you could get the corrupted Ashbringer? You're a druid, what if you could get a whole another form that made you look like an Owlcat or a Spectral Kitty? When you played your Enhancement Shaman, depending on the stuff you do in the game, your Doomhammer could either be blazing with fire or just covered in ice, molded in a variety of different ways. And it's a cosmetical change that everybody else got to see as well. And Blizzard had a lot of these different cosmetics for these weapons, which again I feel it gave a lot of replayability to the class that we play, but also playing alt characters and trying to go for different looks. Next, let's talk about the content. And World of Warcraft does a pretty decent job with content. They are really good at dungeons, raids, and can be kind of okay in PvP sometimes. It all depends on how you view the expansion. But dungeons and raids is the best that Blizzard does. I think the raids were pretty good. There was quite a bit of variety, and we got to tackle on some of the biggest villains of World of Warcraft. Gul'dan, Kil'jaeden, and in some ways Sargeras, rather not directly through him, but rather through Argus, one of the World Soul planets we get to go to at a later time in Legion. The dungeons in particular for Legion were extra good. When they added the Mythic Plus mechanic, it actually gave dungeons a reason to be ran, because previously in older expansions you would do normal dungeons, get all the gear, then you would hop into heroic dungeons, collect all the gear, and then you would go into raiding normals, and then you didn't really need to go back to the dungeons ever. But this time around in Legion, they made it as part of the endgame content. You can push these dungeons with the affix system, which we have today, and you can get the gear like you can certainly like in Shadowlands. So this was where that system came from, and it finally gave dungeons a reason to be ran multiple times over. And it was pretty enjoyable because it was kind of content that players would do kind of one and done, but this way they could keep replaying it at different difficulties with different affixes, which I feel like kept them pretty fresh. Also, out of Legion, Lower and Upper Karazhan came out. It was the best two dungeons, but really kind of run one mega dungeon, some of the best dungeon content I've ever seen. It's basically the original Karazhan raid turned into dungeon, with the Lower Karazhan staying more true to the original Karazhan mechanics, but the Upper Karazhan was really just wacky. It was all over the place with a lot of the different visuals for it, where the character can be going through this corridor and now it twists and now you're walking on the ceiling, and then you fight Medivh and go through this wormhole that turns you tiny in his library, and then you go into the cosmos where there's literally planets and a demon invasion, which looks like it's outdoors but indoors. It's a really trippy experience, but it was really well done. How the first half was more closer to the iconic, the original, like an homage, but then the second really just turned things up a notch. Then there was also PvP, which had scaling. Some people liked it, some people didn't. You could jump into PvP in arenas and battlegrounds easily, since basically gear didn't really matter, but I definitely had my fun time in Legion, but some players didn't really enjoy scaling, neither did I, so it really comes down to whether you like that kind of system or not. Then there was also World Quest. That's when those were added, very similar to the World Quest of today, but at the time, previously, before this, in WoD and MoB, you had daily quests. World Quest allowed players to do the quests they wanted, so they could skip out on some while doing the others. There was a variety of different reputations and mounts that you could get with the Paragon boxes. Essentially what we get to enjoy today, but at the time in Legion, it was all new and exciting. Finally, I think some of the best stuff Legion has done is the solo content, and there was a lot of different solo things for players to work on. They gave a variety of different loot, but a lot of them gave artifact weapon appearances or maybe toys, and there are a lot of them more progressive in terms of the first time you run it, it might be difficult, but then you get a couple upgrades, so then the next time you run it, it will be easier. So you really get to see your character and your experience on this progress. It gets easier. You get to go further in the experience until you can complete it. Very similar to if you play a roguelike, you go as far as you can up some kind of like a tower, and as you go through the tower, you get to collect different treasures, and you can spend those treasures on upgrades so you can go further into the tower. It started off with the Withered training, where you would talk to Thelyssera, which was one of the leader of the Nightborn Rebellion. You essentially took these Withered, which are kind of like Nightborn citizens that drained out of mana and now they lost their mind, and you would run them through this gauntlet, trying to slay as many mobs as you can, slaying as many elites as you can, and getting as many treasures as possible, going as far as possible until you die, or all your Withered die, or all your Withered run away, because you kind of have to babysit them. So you have to babysit the Withered, get as many treasures as you can, trying to amass as many Withered and find as many as you can, trying to keep them alive, and those guys can sometimes just run into troubles just by themselves, and you're trying to see how far you can progress. My first few times doing this, they died all the time. I would just send them and they would aggro the boss and they would just get melted, and eventually I would run out of them before I could get super far. But I got some upgrades to make him tougher, tankier, and I got some upgrades in order to have more of them at the very start. So I would run in, kind of go in first, get the aggro, let him back me up, and try to see if we can progress further into this experience until you can go for a flawless run. For many players to get a flawless run took a while, and there was a variety of different rewards like catch-up gear, artifact power, reputation, variety of different currencies, and even skins for some of your artifact weapons. Blizzard continued this with Chromie Time, and I didn't really do too much Chromie Time myself, but it was essentially very similar. You're trying to help Chromie stop the moment of their death. So you're going through different time portals into different parts and histories of World of Warcraft, and you're trying to progress it as far as you can until you run to a stop. Then you would take the progress you've made and spend the currency you got from that progress into a better run next time, and then keep doing it until you can complete it fully for a variety of different rewards. Mage Tower, I probably shouldn't say much about it, but Mage Tower was a variety of different bosses and challenges. It was different based on your healer, based on your DPS, based on your spec, based on your playstyle, and it was essentially try to defeat the boss with all the different mechanics. It's just you versus the boss and your consumables, and many players had to go for hundreds of pulls before they were able to defeat the boss. Some of it was challenging at the very beginning, but towards the tail of the game, you got catch-up gear, characters grew stronger, our weapons improved, and essentially these fights were made easier if you want to progress through them. Also, there was class order hall mounts, which while that wasn't really a solo challenge, it was something you could work towards. It was pretty grindy. You had to go to the Broken Shore and do a variety of different annoying quests for Khadgar, which just have you do those menial tasks until you get to the final big one. And you had to do a mini class challenge for it. The Rogue challenge was quite interesting. As a Horde Rogue, I had to sneak into 4 Alliance cities, Darnassus, Stormwind, Ironforge, as well as Exodar, and that was not easy to travel to that one, and slay a key target in every one of these areas. These targets weren't outside of the capital cities, they were way deep in there, and a variety of them had different qualifiers. Like, for example, the dwarf in Ironforge, he was ironclad with armor. He took 99% less damage from all sources, but poisons and bleeds. The game really wanted for me to do this as Assassination Rogue in order to slay him and assassinate him before he finds some guards for help. This was back then on a PvP server where there's other players constantly in capital cities ready to PvP at a moment's notice, so it was definitely a hell of an experience. And every class had their own class challenge. I've only done the Rogue and the Priest one, and maybe eventually I'll go back and do some of the other ones since Legion Time Walking is coming back, but it was also another thing that was a long quest chain that you could do on your ults that you could work towards as a solo challenge. Making dungeons, making raids, and doing PvP seasons with class changes is all fine and dandy, but solo challenges and solo things to do in Legion, I think, gave players something to do long term. Something you could either do as a casual player or something you could do someone as a hardcore player with a variety of different prestige rewards from it. Something that eventually as a player it will be made easier as the expansion goes on in order to be able to acquire these challenges. And I think that definitely was a strength of Legion from back in the day. With Legion Time Walking fast approaching, whenever patch 9.15 is going to be coming out, a lot of players are excited for Legion because Legion was a really good time. This is especially important to people since if you are someone who isn't having the best time in Shadowlands, Legion was definitely one of those shining examples. And many players have asked, why can't Blizzard do Legion all over again? Why can't every single expansion be as good as Legion was? If anything, I think Legion teaches a couple things. One, Blizzard class design back in the day was at least kind of interesting. I mean, especially with 2 legendaries, the artifact weapon, especially once you get it fully maxed out, we had some really interesting classes. We had progression. Our classes were growing stronger and stronger, and I think that's what a lot of people are missing. For Blizzard to use non-powered power systems to make our classes grow. A lot of classes are changing because of borrowed powers, and some of them can be actually quite interesting. I mean, lots of people by the end of Shadowlands are going to miss Door of Shadows and Convoke for druids, but we're not seeing these progressions as a permanent thing. We're not watching our classes grow in a direction. It's rather we're taking a sidestep, detour, seeing how our class could potentially be, and then we're just going to go back to how they are normally. I think it's a good idea to find ways to make our classes grow, to change the different playstyles, add abilities that modify the way we play, add passive that radically transform how our character evolves over time, something that's more permanent. I think using borrowed power systems is easier, trying some stuff that isn't permanent whatsoever and can be changed at a later time or scrapped completely. But I think our classes still need to have evolution. Yeah, they need to evolve, they need to grow and get stronger and better and more interesting, and even in some cases more complicated if it has to be. I think if Blizzard does like to use the borrowed power system as like a crutch to make our classes interesting, if they at least can make our classes grow while also having some borrowed power stuff, as long as we're seeing some permanent class progression that will stay into the next expansion, that will evolve as time goes on, I think that's something a lot of players would want to see in general. Another thing that was really cool is the class uniqueness, as well as the different stories that were written for different classes. It's not like there were, the craziest stories. I mean, most of the Artifact Weapon quests didn't really last super long, but they were unique. They gave a lot of replayability. They gave some really unique stuff that only you could get as that class. Going forward, with Blizzard talking about how they want to bring tier sets back, I really do hope they bring back tier sets. Players want class uniqueness. They like flavor stuff. A lot of people do. It's something that you have just because you're that class might make you want to play as that class. Also, solo content in Legion was fantastic. I don't think Blizzard needs a lot of solo content. They just need a bit here and there. Something that's difficult at first, but will be better and easier as progression goes on. But the rewards also need to be pretty important. The rewards themselves need to be less mandatory, but something that's prestigious, something that you would want. I feel like Torghast would have been a perfect time to do it, except Torghast you kind of have to do for your legendaries. And less so in 9.15, and maybe Blizzard will change it completely in the next patch. However, Twisting Corridors I think would have been a perfect time to do it, especially if they went really creative and really ham with some of the different anima powers. If they allowed players to just be completely broken strong, to become absolute gods walking through the halls of Torghast, fighting some of the strongest mobs ever while also being overpowered themselves, basically fighting David the Goliath as David the Goliath. But the rewards will also need to be able to match, and I think the best way to do it would to make something that doesn't exist in the game. Something really cool and really unique, really out of this world, very similar to the Legion rewards, how the Artifact Weapons of Mage Tower, for example, they were extra unique and they are going to preserve it. What if they added just some insanely cool cosmetics, maybe even more druid forms on there? How cool would that be? I think it's a perfect opportunity, and then kind of weird that they haven't done it yet. But anyway, that's going to be my memory trip through Legion. I enjoyed talking about it a lot. I hope you guys enjoyed this as well. If you did, give this video a like. If you want me to do more stuff like this in the future at some point, because I don't really do a lot of long talky videos like this, let me know. Discord is probably the best place to reach me. A link down below in the description. But thank you guys so much for checking out this video. This would be my reasons as to why I think Legion was one of the best expansions from back in the day, and definitely something that Blizzard could take, a page out of the Legion book and potentially apply for Shadowlands. I don't really know how many more patches we have in Shadowlands, and it is worth saying Legion didn't really start out as amazing and insane. It definitely had a lull of content and a lot of things to do for a time, but it really picked up. So I wonder if maybe that's something they can do for Shadowlands at some point in the future, or maybe that's just hopium talking. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see all of you in the next one.